Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most incredible metals on the planet, platinum. Now, you might think you know it from jewelry, but its real story is this absolutely wild ride of epic mistakes, brilliant innovations, and bizarre legal loopholes. And believe it or not, its journey tells us a ton about how we decide anything has value at all. All right, before we get into the crazy stuff, just the standard heads up. This is all just for your information. It is definitely not financial advice. We're here for the stories, not the stock tips. Okay, so let's start with the central puzzle right here. We all know platinum is ridiculously rare, way more so than gold. So how on earth did people once treat it like actual garbage? Literally throwing it back into rivers. That massive contradiction is exactly what we're going to unravel today. And here's our game plan. We've got 4 incredible tales lined up, starting with the Spanish conquistadors who thought platinum was useless, all the way to a modern-day legal trick that could, in theory, save the entire U.S. economy. You ready? Let's get into it. Our first story takes us back to the 1700s in what's now Colombia. You've got Spanish explorers, and they are laser-focused on one thing, gold. But while they're panning in the rivers, they keep finding this annoying, heavy, silvery metal mixed in with all the good stuff. And for them, it's just a total pain. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. They called it platina, which means little silver, and they had this theory that it was just gold that wasn't, well, finished cooking yet. So what did they do? They chucked it back in the river to ripen. They were literally throwing away a fortune because it just didn't fit with what they thought they knew. And this, right here, is a perfect lesson in a huge economic idea, perceived value. It basically means something's worth is not what it costs to make or how rare it is, it's what people think it's worth. Platinum was dense, it was corrosion-proof, it was super rare, it had all this incredible intrinsic value. But to the Spanish, it was worthless. They couldn't melt it easily, and they were worried people would use it to make counterfeit gold coins. So to them, it wasn't a treasure, it was a liability. So how do we look back on this massive blunder? Well, one way is to say that their obsession with gold, the only standard of wealth they cared about, gave them total tunnel vision. But another way to see it is as a timeless warning. Even the experts, the people who literally have their hands on the resources, can get it completely and catastrophically wrong. Okay, let's jump forward a bit. Eventually, the world figures out that platinum is actually amazing. And the first country that really tried to make it into money was Russia. But, that didn't go so smoothly. So in the 1820s, Russia, sitting on a nice stash of platinum, starts making these platinum ruble coins. Super ambitious. But there was this one giant roadblock. Platinum's melting point is insane, over 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit. It was just a nightmare to work with, super expensive and difficult, and that created a massive economic problem. It all comes down to this fancy word called seigniorage. All it means is the profit the government makes on minting money. You know, if it costs 5 cents of metal to make a quarter, the government makes 20 cents. Simple. But with these platinum rubles, it was so expensive to actually stamp the coins that they were losing money on every single one. The seigniorage was negative. The whole project was doomed from the start. Now let's fast forward to the 20th century, because this is where platinum really finds its groove. It turns out to be a miracle metal for catalytic converters in cars, the thing that cleans up your exhaust. So suddenly, demand goes through the roof, and by the 2000s, the price shot past $2,000 an ounce. Automakers looked at that bill and said, no way, and they did what smart businesses do. They got creative. This is a picture-perfect example of the substitution effect. It's a simple idea. If something gets way too expensive, people will pour money and brain power into finding a cheaper alternative. And that's what happened. Car makers re-engineered their systems to use palladium instead. And the hilarious part? The demand shifted so dramatically that palladium's price eventually rocketed up, even past platinum's. It's the ultimate proof that in economics, nothing and nobody is truly indispensable. So we've talked about perception, we've talked about industry, but the story of where platinum actually comes from is maybe the most mind-blowing part of all. I mean, where is this stuff actually hiding? Just look at this chart for a second. It's hard to even wrap your head around. 90% of all the platinum reserves we know of on planet Earth are in one country, South Africa. And it gets crazier. It's pretty much all in this one thin layer of rock called the Merensky Reef that sneaks for hundreds of miles underground. This geological fluke gives South Africa what's called a natural monopoly. This isn't a company buying up all its rivals. This is a monopoly created by a cosmic accident 2 billion years ago. Think about that.
The fate of this incredibly critical metal for our high-tech world rests almost entirely on one single place.
And that leads to a huge vulnerability for the rest of us, and it's called geopolitical risk. So many of our modern technologies, from hydrogen fuel cells to life-saving medical equipment, rely on a steady stream of platinum from that one region. So if there's a labor strike, or political turmoil, or even just rolling blackouts in South Africa, the shockwaves are felt in factories and labs all across the globe. Which brings us to our last story. And folks, this is by far the most bizarre one. It sounds like something out of a movie, but I promise you, it's based on a very real, very strange part of American law. It's about how one tiny coin could solve a multi-trillion-dollar problem. So get this. U.S. law puts very clear limits on the dollar value that can be stamped on gold and silver coins, but for some reason, probably just an oversight, the law says the Treasury Secretary can mint a platinum coin and give it any value they want. $1, $1,000, $1 billion, whatever they decide. So whenever Washington gets into these huge fights over the debt ceiling, this wild idea gets brought up. The Treasury could, theoretically, take a 1-ounce platinum coin, stamp it $1 trillion, walk it over to the Federal Reserve, deposit it, and bam, the government suddenly has an extra $1 trillion in its account to pay its bills, completely sidestepping the political chaos. Now, this idea is fascinating because it pits two really powerful economic forces against each other. On the one hand, it's a brilliant legal loophole, using the law's own weird wording to solve a crisis. But on the other hand, a lot of economists scream that it would be debasement, basically creating money from nothing, which could risk seriously damaging the value of the US dollar. It's a crazy break glass in case of emergency option that's still, technically, on the table. So, wow, from the rivers of Columbia to the vaults of the Federal Reserve, what has this bizarre metal actually taught us? What are the big takeaways from these strange tales? Let's tie it all together. This table really nails it. The Spanish story gave us a masterclass on perceived value. The lesson, just because you don't get it, doesn't mean it's worthless. The Russian ruble failure taught us about seigniorage. If it costs more to make the money than the money is worth, you've got a problem. The car industry showed us the raw power of the substitution effect. Price yourself out of the market and someone will replace you. The Merensky Reef is the definition of a natural monopoly and geopolitical risk. And that $1 trillion coin, it's the ultimate example of a legal loophole. Each one is a fantastic little story to have in your back pocket. You know, when you look at its whole history, platinum shows us that value is never simple or permanent. It's this messy, evolving thing based on geology, technology, and what we all just decide to believe. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What is the platinum of our time? What crucial resource are we overlooking right now, metaphorically tossing back in the river, totally blind to its real future worth? Hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive and found it valuable, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button and like the video. It really helps us out. We'll be back soon with another explainer. Thanks so much for watching.